Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a reel that a viewer sent in. This one is Julio's from Puerto Rico, and he's got a problem with this reel. It's a Triton Trolling reel, the 50W. It's an older reel, but the reel cranks, but there's no connection. It's not moving the spool regardless of what you do. And Julio thought the problem was that the adjuster knob that sets the preset for your lever drag had broken off, and he ordered a replacement. And as a quick piece, I actually put the replacement in, but still no activity. And actually I did some problem diagnostics on this one, and we found that the actual adjuster that's inside is frozen, and that's probably how the little lever or the tab that was on this broke off. It probably was frozen. Somebody probably tried to force it and just snapped the end of it. So I'm going to show you how to take this reel apart, service this reel, and actually replace the lever drag adjuster that makes this reel work. And then at the end of this one, hopefully we'll be able to restore this one, get it back to Julio, and have him do some good fishing. Before we start, a couple of things. I always wear that protective glove. I always keep parts trays around. I pulled the Shimano diagram for the trolling series. You can see that this one is actually from 1987, which means that, you know, it's a 30-year-old reel, and that parts generally aren't available. And actually I had to buy the parts for this used. But these are good blueprints that tell us how the reel comes together should we have any issue with that. And then finally, there's a specialty tool for lever drag reels. I actually believe I bought this one for a Penn reel, the Penn International. It is also for a reel like this. And interestingly enough, the nut for the handle nut is on here, and the bigger wrench for the back for the drag surfaces in here as well. This one is available at mysticparts.com, and I'm pretty sure it was from the Penn International, but as I mentioned, it kind of works both ways. So there's the handle screw right on that wrench, so we're going to take that off. This one came with a broken set screw. I'll try to put that back at the end if it at all matters right now. So I'm going to take the pieces off. We'll show you how this works. And again, I always recommend that you keep a parts tray around so that you have easy access to it. Next up would then be this little shield that protects the handle. This is a single speed reel, so it only has one gear in it. Next off, we're going to take this adjuster piece off here, which actually includes the piece that was broken, and that was simply held on by a C-clip, and we put that back as it should have been. So this is a big game trolling reel. I can see how it would be used in Puerto Rico. I imagine they're going for the marlin and the wonderful species that are down that way. Probably some sailfish were caught on this one. Imagine some sharks were caught on it as well. It does show that it's been used, but it didn't show that it was abused. Okay, this is the piece that broke. You can see the new tab on there, and this is how it was sitting under there. So this got ripped off. And in my problem diagnosis, I actually pulled the lever drag off, which we can do here. And this is the preset that is used, and I put a screwdriver in there, and this is frozen. I put a bigger screwdriver in, but this is frozen. This cannot be turned, and that's obviously what happened. That froze, probably because it hadn't been oiled or that, and when that froze, the adjuster screw there that was used to try and move it snapped. So that's what we have is we have a side plate that doesn't adjust. I'm now taking off the ring that the lever drag arm rides on. And none of this really needs a lot of maintenance on the external pieces here. If you were to maintain it, all you would simply do is pretty much spray it down with a general oil cleaner like a WD-40 just to get the contamination of it off at the end of a trip. Hose it down with fresh water, but it's an external part of the reel, and as such it doesn't really require any kind of maintenance to it. And then we got a whole bunch of screws here now for the faceplate here, so we're going to take those out. And we want to notice on this one as well, there's 2 screws that are long and the rest of them are okay, but the 2 long screws are up top here, and they go into this top crossbar, and they also hold on the harness loops. So you want to make sure, just noting as you take a reel like this apart, if there are screws that are different sizes, you just want to make a note of where those screws came from. So what I do like to do is I like to lay these out ahead of time, and then I'll take them all as I take these out of the side plates. And there's some pressure on this side plate, so I'm going to leave 1 or 2 of these partially taken out while I take the rest of them out. But again, just trying to figure out where the odd screws are if they are different sizes. And I believe that the 5 of these, or whatever that number is, are all the same size off of this. So we'll show you the internals working. Again, this is single speed. So there's only 1 gear inside here. But we'll show you the internal workings of it. We'll show you the lubrication points, and we'll go in and take a look at that drag as well, because that would be the other thing. If it wasn't for this adjuster assembly, it would be a bad drag. So we'll go over and take a look at that as well. Right now I'm only seeing that that there are 2 sizes of screws, the 2 long ones which go through the top bars, and then the rest seem to be the same size. So we got 2 more to take off of here. So if you're working on a Penn International, it's not very much different to this point. Again, you want to make sure that you take pictures along the way in case you get stuck in there. You know how you came across the disassembly. Okay, I'm looking at those side plate screws. I have 5 of the smaller ones, and then I have 2 of the longer ones. And as we noted, the 2 longer ones, I'm going to put them in a different tray. The 2 longer ones go through the shield up top. So then we can pull the side plate out of this, and here's your single gear. So we have a single gear. We'll clean this one up and put some blue grease on it and put it back together. We have a bearing which needs to be oiled, that just fell out. And then here's the defective pieces and parts. So those should be able to get pushed through now. And what this does is this, when you go to set your lever drag, this pushes that whole assembly in, which engages the drag washer on the back end. All right, this is frozen, and this is what needed to be replaced. I was fortunate enough to find these on eBay. Again, this reel was made in 1987, so you're not going to find stock parts for this one around. At least when I went to look, I couldn't find them. But I was fortunate enough to find these used for a minor king's ransom. But I guess, you know, if you want to keep this reel working, the $20 or so that we spent on this part is probably better than letting the reel go. All right, so that's simply enough. This should just simply screw in. And you can see this one turns, and that's what's gonna, this is gonna be your push. It's gonna push onto this. Pushing this stud is going to engage the drag washer on the back of the spool. Okay, so I'm just gonna, actually I'll just throw a drop of oil in there. They're kind of dry at this point. I imagine that the vendor kind of cleaned these up, probably with an ultrasonic or something, so we'll just go ahead and move that. Okay, so from an assembly standpoint, we want to clean out that little gullet there, and I suspect what happened was that there was some salt water got in there and stayed in there and eventually just caused the other piece to seize. And then we're just going to reinsert this. Now if I was just in the business of repairing this reel, I believe that that would be enough, but again, we're going to go take the whole reel apart at this point. So we have a shielded bearing here. We'll just throw some oil on that, let it kind of seep in there. That bearing goes on top. then you'll notice that there was a little washer that came off of here. That's actually off of the spool side here. And we're going to move that spool now, and I'll show you what belongs on the rest of this reel. But before that, I don't like to leave a lot of pieces and parts out. So here's the main gear. It's a beautifully machined piece of high-strength metals. So let's just grab some blue grease on this one. I'm going to put some on that shaft, and then we'll just set that shaft back into the collar. And now this is getting ready to reinstall, so I'm going to put that up into the piece where I had my side plate. Over here we have the back end bearing. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on that, let that flood. I'm going to grab a cotton swab and just clean up. These are the anti-reverse dogs are here, the two of these. And you'll see when I grab the spool, you'll see how those sit. Right now I'm just going to clean off the dried grease on there. And then that's all you need to do on this side. We have a bearing and two anti-reverse dogs. So let's go over to the business end of this. I'm going to take this off first. This is the drive gear, and there's a washer that's associated with that. There should be a bearing back here. So again, I'll just throw a little bit of oil back in there to let that seep in. Now if I really wanted to go nuts, I could pull this pin out, shoot this thing through, and get to that if I needed to repair it, but I don't at this point. So here's two washers that sit on the drive post or the through post, and here's where that tool comes into play now. There are 4 slots in this side plate. Grab one of them with the tooth and pay attention on the reel. Sometimes these are reverse threaded, in other words loosen this way, so you just have to pay attention here. I believe this is threaded this way. And all you have to do is put some pressure here. You'll notice that the cupping on this fits exactly around that side. And here we go. We got lucky. So you can turn it like that, or eventually you can usually work these free with your hand. There we go. And this is a collar. So we're going to see a collar on this, and then we're going to, these are where your anti-reverse dogs sit in that I showed you on the other portion of the reel. And we're just going to go over now to check out the drag. That's what I'm going to do here. Here's your collar. And take these before we lose these and put those in the tray. This is the one that belongs on top of that. These two belong on the back of this shaft. This is going to go back to Julio. It's frozen. All right, now we can pull the plate out. That's a nice pressure plate. What you want to do on this one is check for scarring, and we're in good shape with that, so there's no issues there relative to the performance of the reel. And he didn't mention that that the drag was slipping or anything. He just mentioned that it wouldn't engage, and that's because of that screw pressure. Here's our drag. This is a fabric drag. So you want to check, you want to make sure that it's in good stead. It is. I like to put a little bit of grease on this. There's a drag grease, a Cal's Universal drag grease here. Put a little bit in, I'm going to work it in, and then I'm going to remove the excess. That's just to keep the drag washer fresh and flexible. I have a gloved hand, which becomes my tool for this. I'm going to do the same on the back here. And just working it in on the other side as well. And then what we want to do is take a paper towel and wipe off all the excess. Again, we just wanted to get it in the grooves. We didn't need to leave it chunky or anything. Actually, that'll affect it. So I just want to make sure it's nice and clean. And it's got a fresh set on it. We'll clean this off as well. And then again, we have a bearing on this side, so we want to flood that with the oil as well. So we can just reinstall this now. The fabric drag goes on. The pressure plate goes on. Now it's got a little fork in there, so you want to make sure that that seats properly. And we can hand thread this for the most part, the collar. Then you're going to use that wrench just for that last turn there, just to make sure you have it seated. You don't have to over tighten this. Again, we'll just use that wrench to complete the last few turns of this. There we go. Once it seats, you're done. And then we had the 2 tension washers on the back here. So we'll go ahead and put that on. We'll cover up our lubricants, get those out of the way. And then we can go ahead and reassemble this and see if we've had any luck here with this rebuild. Okay, I'm going to put my wrench out to the side there. I won't need that until I put the handle on. These are the 2 dogs that sit in here. You want to make sure that as you reseat this, that the dogs get reseated as well. They have been. Okay, so next up then is to put the drive gear back in. There's a bushing that sits on that little slot there. And then on the drive gear, we want to make sure it's clean. There's a little bit of junk here, so we'll just get that off. Some excess grease. Just checking in the channels. Okay, and then what we want to do is, you'll see a slot on this side. The slot sits over that fork. And then we can just reset the side plate. Now this is your click mechanism. You'll notice that we have the click here. If you disengage, it pulls that little stud in. If you engage, it pushes the stud out. And you'll notice on this side, on the spool, there's a series of holes here. And that's what actually causes the click. This little stud will ride, and as it bounces in and out of those holes, that's your click. So put a little bit of oil on there as well. I use a Real X oil for this, but any manufacturer's fishing reel oil will work. And then we just want to reseat. And again, remembering where those pieces went. Okay, so right now I'm just going to back this off, which is the new set. I'm going to go over to my bucket, which had the side plate screws in it. We're going to go grab those. Now, because there's a little bit of tension on this, I'm going to just put these screws in some opposing positions just to kind of balance out the... There we go. Got to get it seated properly. And I'm not going to tighten them all down. I'm just going to get them to the point where they... there's little crimp washers on this. I'm going to get that to the point where they all hold the tension equally. I'm going to leave those 2 long ones out for a moment, because typically what will happen is that harness triangle will fall out of position. You're going to need a centering pin or something for that. Move this down a little bit now. I'm going to grab another one of these with the lock washer. And again, the 5 smaller ones went to the outside, and the 2 longer ones went up top to the harness. So we're going to put the 3rd one in now. And then I can tighten down the 3 of these. And I can come over and do try for the longer one. Now, most of the time this piece moves, the harness piece moves, and you'll know that if you can't get it in there. So I use a little awl or something with the reach, get in there, and try and, there you go, line the holes. You can feel it when it aligns, and you can also see it. It's not as proud as it was before. And then hopefully we can grab the little cross member behind it there. There we go, we got that one. So there's one more on this side that goes. I just moved that one in by my hand there. That's because we already had the pivot point on the other one. So let's get that back. And then we got the other 2 of these, so we can put those in. And that's the beauty of a parts bucket. When you go into your parts tray, you can see that you know, if you have an extra part there, you just have to sit there and ask yourself, well, gee whiz, why is that like it is? If it came off the reel, it's got to go back on the reel. So if you use that parts tray and you have any extras, you know you forgot to put them in somewhere. And if you don't remember where you got the part from, that's the whole idea behind taking pictures along the way, so that you'll have a visual cue that will remind you of where that came from. So we don't have too many parts left on this, but now we're back to the outside, and we're back to that moment of truth to see how this operates with the new tensioning piece. All right, we got to tighten this one up. I'm just checking to make sure as I go around it, they're all tight. You know, boat vibration is going to cause a lot of these to move around, so you want to make sure that you get these done to the extent that you can. That one needs to be tightened as well. Now, some folks always ask me, you know, why don't you use a mechanical screwdriver along the lines of a battery-operated ones. You know, they've all suggested their favorite brands. I don't like them. I think that there's more harm to be done with those than good. I've seen these things snap off and otherwise become a problem because they have such excess torque in them. But if you need them, I always recommend that if you don't have the hand strength to work on these, you know, go ahead and use them to some extent, but the caveat always is leave those screws short and then come in and set them fully when you by hand. Tighten the last 2 or 3 turns by hand. Don't tighten them with that mechanical screwdriver. And be careful about that because of the torque associated with that. Okay, so 2 of the short screws there. We got 2 long screws coming in on the other side. Those are the ones that are the bump guards for the throw of that lever drag arm. I noticed one of these doesn't have the little plastic cup on it. That's okay, it'll work. This one will go on this side. And again, this reel's been around a long time, so it's not unusual to see that you know, some of the smaller pieces may have been bumped off, broken, etc., the cosmetic stuff. But this will certainly stop what needs to be stopped here. Okay, now we're on to the adjuster. So this should fit in there now. I'm just going to try and take it, eyeball it first to get it close. There we go. I'm sure that's going to work a whole lot better. We have the 3 screws here now. So there's not a lot of differences in lever drags. You saw that there's a pressure plate and a pull and a push versus the more traditional conventional reels. But when you get within the lever drags themselves, they're all pretty much the same type of a thinking. In the case of a pen, the adjuster and the drag plate is on the front side as opposed to the rear side of this one, or the right side versus the left side. But short of that, they're pretty much the same in their notion. The idea being that as you push the spool assembly's shaft, you move that whole thing in, and that puts the pressure plate that you saw, that nice shiny silver piece, in contact with the drag assembly. And that makes this work. Okay, we're down to a little shield for the handle. That should just snap on. Sometimes with the wear, there you go. Sometimes with the wear, you have to go back and, oops. So you have A little bit too quick there. I put this assembly on and there's a little plastic washer. What I was saying about the parts tray. There's a little plastic washer that runs on that lever drag arm. So I'll just take that off for a moment. Put that little washer back in place here. So quick to try and get that adjuster nut, preset nut in place that I forgot that there was a little plastic one. Again, that's the beauty here of a parts tray, is to grab that. Now see, that sits there as such. Now we can put this back in. Now we can put those 3 screws on. And we can put that little collar back on, put the handle back on, give it a spin, make sure that it's working properly. And if it is, we can go return it to Julio and have him go out there, catch some more big fish and send us pictures. And one more. So the parts here came from eBay. And I would tell you that there's enough people out there that are selling used parts that it's worth looking at if you can't find them from a manufacturer source. As I said, sometimes you get they cost a lot because they're just not available, and folks know that they can get the money that they get. But you know what? If it's that or scrap the reel, then I think it's probably worth looking into and going to get that part for you. So, all right, here we go with this. All I have in that tray now, it looks like, is broken pieces and parts. I go grab my handle, screw nut. Let's give it a try. Let's see what we got. There we go. We're working. I got the clicker on. So that's it. That's it. We are working. We got a free spool that spins. We go and engage for first strike. I want to probably tighten that up just a little bit. That's the adjuster notion of it. Throw it into full, and we've got that thing working like it should be working. All right, free spool. First strike. It's not tight enough. There you go. Full spin. Okay, so that's it. That's the and all we have left in here is one frozen assembly, one broken piece that Julio provided me, and we'll see if we can go put that back on somehow, but it just belongs on here. We'll see if we can play with that in a little while. So that's it. That's how you do a Triton trolling reel. It's a Shimano. It's an older one for sure, but it's one that can still go fishing, and it's one that I'm sure is going to go land a lot more fish out there. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.